Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. A few weeks ago, I covered a story about the Genius Act with Lynette Zhang, as you just heard her speaking. And I've been wanting to continue that discussion because I kind of just covered the surface of it. So today we will dive into what exactly the Genius Act is and how it will affect us as Americans. So they just passed the Genius Act, and if you're holding crypto or using digital payments or just care about the future of money, you need to hear this. The full name is the Guiding and Establishing National Innovation for U.S. Stablecoins Act. But is it really about innovation, as the government is claiming? Or is it about control of your money, your purchases, or tracking or spying? This new federal law creates an ironclad regulatory system for stablecoins, requiring 100% reserves and giving the government unprecedented oversight, even the power to freeze or seize your digital assets.
Law, and it's about to change everything about how Americans store and access their money.
This new federal law creates an ironclad regulatory system for stablecoins, requiring 100% reserves and giving the government unprecedented oversight, even the power to freeze or seize your digital assets. So we're cutting through the government bullshit to show you exactly what the Genius Act is and why it's got the crypto world seriously worried. So let's break down the law. So the first thing is to look for signs, right? The first thing is it happening elsewhere? That's the first thing. So unfortunately, the first sign did happen in Vietnam. This was the first warning shot for the United States. So Vietnam just froze $86 million bank accounts overnight due to non-compliance of this Genius Act. And that non-compliance was no one had a mandatory biometric verification. So no one was able to access their funds or their monies. So if you have not heard about the Genius Act, Trump signed the law to be effective September 1st of 2025 with no remote options. And why does this matter to Americans? Well, like Lynette says, this isn't isolated. It's once it happens in one country, it's a domino effect. It happens globally. As I just told you, in Vietnam is our first sign. So those same biometric systems are being pushed in the U.S. governments, and they can freeze your accounts at will. This Genius Act establishes a federal regulation system for stablecoins, which means who can issue stablecoins? Who has the authority to issue these stablecoins? Only approved banks and credit unions or Fed-approved institutions. The U.S. has $35 trillion in debt, and stablecoins will create new treasury bond buyers. Anyone with a smartphone can now hold dollars, which is really U.S. debt. The U.S. desperately needs someone to buy that debt, but foreign countries are not buying it, except for the British and the Europeans. The entire rest of the world is actually selling the U.S. debt, but the stablecoin creates an automated buyer for the U.S. debt. It's the only way for the U.S. stablecoin companies to make money. So here's how it works. You buy a stable U.S. coin with real U.S. dollars. The issuer or the stablecoin company takes your dollars and buys treasury bills or U.S. debt. The issuer then makes 5% interest and you get nothing. So basically, your stable dollar is actually backed by U.S. government debt. And why is this dangerous? Because stable coins are basically debt funds, which Wall Street calls them money market funds to make it sound professional. Stable coins equal unregulated money market funds. Just like in the 2008 crash, the money market funds froze during that financial crisis. No one was able to get any money or anything out of their accounts. There's no Fed backstop. Unlike banks, stablecoins won't get bailed out. So there is some serious panic or concern regarding this. Now we get into the AI and spying connection of this whole entire Genius Act. The Palantir connection. We know the founder is Peter Thiel, otherwise called the Antichrist, and of course, our corrupt President Trump. They are also contracted with the SEC, IRS, and everybody else. If you watched any of the AI Stargate Initiative Summit a few weeks ago, which I did, Trump spoke and praised Palantir for the partnership with the U.S. for this initiative. So they will work with stablecoin banks to create monitoring systems, watching your every single move. Now, why would the U.S. want to do this? Because it will allow the government to monitor or spy on your every move and on your every purchase or what you spend your money on. Palantir's surveillance capability platforms are known for their ability to process massive, messy data sets and use AI to identify patterns and flag individuals, leading to concerns about the potential for creating a mega database for broad surveillance or selective enforcement. Financial regulations like the Banks Secrecy Act law requires financial institutions to conduct know your customer processes and monitor suspicious activity. Palantir software were to be utilized by a financial regulator or a regulator stablecoin issuer, it could technically be used to monitor all transactions. Concerns about Palantir are centered on its role in data aggregation and AI-driven analysis for various government agencies, and the risk of this technology being used for excessive surveillance of U.S. citizens. This would enforce the biometric trap, which means that you would need digital IDs required for high-value transactions, or really any transactions. Every transaction is recorded permanently and publicly on open ledgers. Every transaction is linked to a complete history transaction. And your biometric data, your eye scan, your finger scan, or any biometric data is linked to this history. It's a perfect setup for spying on Americans. Complete financial surveillance. So real-world examples are the one I just told you about in Vietnam. It just recently happened. 86 million accounts were frozen for non-compliance. And this is all coming to America. All the same technology, just different packaging. So the winners of this currency change are, of course, the big banks who have to approve the issue of your stablecoin. The treasury bond market, which gains forced buyers. And then the surveillance company, which is, this case, Palantir. They will profit from the expanded revenue. Now, the losers will be us, the American people. By losing, 1, our privacy. 2, small banks will lose mainly because of the high cost and complexity of the federal regulation. New laws like the Genius Act will require all issuers to maintain a 1-to-1 reserve backing with liquid assets. And they'll have to adhere to strict anti-money laundering and compliance rules and invest in costly cybersecurity and reporting systems. So all the small banks will suffer severely. While there is an option for smaller state-qualified issuers, the law typically caps their size at $10 billion in outstanding stablecoins, forcing them to transition to even more rigorous and resource-intensive federal framework if they grow, which effectively limits the ability of community banks to compete with large financial institutions and tech companies in that space. And third is your cash. Cash will no longer be useful. Cash will be a thing of the past. It will no longer be used. I like to say, for every disaster, there's an opportunity. And those are, first, owning physical gold or silver. Gold and silver cannot be digitally seized or cannot be frozen or tracked. So that's the first thing. And I did do that. I went out and bought as much silver as I could afford. I haven't bought the gold yet. I'm almost there to buying it. I will eventually buy it. It's very expensive, but I'm right there to purchase some gold. These, like I said, cannot be digitally seized or frozen or tracked. The second is Bitcoin. It's decentralized alternative, but will probably eventually be regulated. Like it might be maybe registering your Bitcoin wallet with the government, something like that. Foreign assets, diversification outside of the US system if you're able to. Real estate, your property. Keep physical assets because they can freeze everything else. And don't put everything in the US. Don't invest everything in the US. Try to invest in other countries if possible. So the immediate actions is you could hold other currencies, like I mentioned before, gold and silver, your real estate. You could spread your assets across different countries if possible. But still keep some of that cash, because if this goes down and they close your account and you don't have any cash on you, you're straight out of luck. So try to keep some cash in the house somewhere, because if they decide to freeze your bank account because you're in non-compliance, you're going to need that cash. So when is this coming? And what are the things to watch for? So the implementation timeline is the Treasury has 20 rule markings to complete. The enforcement actions is how aggressive will they monitor? All it takes is one crazy person who purchases a gun with a stablecoin and kills a political figure, and then they'll implement all these crazy monitoring and spying laws, which in that case might not be a bad idea. International response, how other countries react. So we need to watch the reaction of other countries and how, how they're feeling about this. So in summary, the Genius Act isn't about innovation. It's about money for the big banks and the people who own Tether and things like that. And it's also about control. So let's take it to the next level. What if they imply a 1% transaction fee or tax every time you buy a stablecoin? Vietnam showed us the playbook: either comply or lose your access to your money. So ultimately, the debate isn't about if digital currencies are coming. It's about who gets to issue them, who sets the rules, and what oversight is in place to protect your freedom and privacy once the money you use is no longer just cash in your wallet. It's a high-stakes conversation for the future of finance and civil liberties. Let me know in the comments below. Do you think a regulated digital dollar is necessary for financial stability, or is the risk to privacy just too high? Hit that like button, subscribe for more breakdowns, and I'll catch you in the next video. Thanks for watching.